Dr. Mashego, it's always a great pleasure having you with us. So let's get your initial reaction as well as assessment of the story, especially since we've just heard also about what actually led to the incident from the SANDF. What was your assessment?
Afternoon, and thank you for having me. I think it really emphasizes how soldiers are also human beings, that soldiers also, removing them from their homes into, whether deployed internally in the country or externally, into situations where there is so much pressure, and also the work that they do, they're exposed to so much trauma, which is not normal, right? And because they have their own personal stresses, if they're not seeking the help for their personal stresses, being in that environment, doing their work can trigger reactions whereby, such as what we're seeing now that has happened. So we need to understand that as soldiers, they're constantly on soldier mode, adrenaline, autopilot, ready to fight, ready for battle. And when they return from any type of deployment, that's why it's important to then help them think like civilians. Because when you think like a soldier, you're always thinking of the worst case scenario, right? You're always thinking of saving, you're always on adrenaline, that rush. So honestly, the debriefing cannot be overemphasized, that when they return, be it internally, externally, just being exposed and doing the work that they do, they need to actually be debriefed. The sad thing is that, as you know, there's so much stigma around psychological issues. People, there's a notion that people must be strong, people are crazy when they come see us, but really it's important as part of the work for it to be mandatory, the debriefing.
Absolutely there, Doctor. I mean, let's talk about PTSD. I mean, we understand here in South Africa, it actually has a higher prevalence as compared to global averages. But is it treated as really a serious mental condition that is actually given this special and necessary attention and treatment, especially, we know it's a huge thing with international troops, right? Where there's even documentaries of how the condition led to many destroying themselves as a result, and how it was then given a special attention in that symptoms are managed instantly. Are you aware of such within our army or even police personnel?
It is theoretically, or according to policy, it should be, a part of the process. But whether it's being actually, put out there for the soldiers as mandatory, so meaning that they don't actually have an option but to go through this process of debriefing. Because as I said, when they are soldiers, they're on soldier mode. We need to help them to become civilians because they're exposed basically to such trauma, and that can take a toll on a person personally and how they, work. So we really need to treat it as a special case whereby they are these processes involved where they seek the help. The tricky part about psychological services is that we cannot sometimes force someone to benefit from the help. They must actually see the need for the help. And remember, it becomes a little bit complex in that it's not just about what happens when they are deployed, but also their personal lives. So we need to ensure that, they seek the help, not just for the deployment, but if there's a stressor at home, because, we know that they tend to then, have struggles like all human beings. So we really need to, as a country, ensure that there's that balance, that they seek the help. But society also, we need to promote how important the mindset is of us as human beings, and not focus just on the body or the physical condition. So, and with PTSD, it can become complicated. And remember, it can trigger other things in your personal life when you are exposed to trauma or you struggle with PTSD. It can be complicated. So really, there's a need, for intense psychotherapy, sometimes medication, and, sometimes people need to be boarded because of its severity.
Doctor, I'm sure you heard the Rear Admiral there saying these soldiers actually go through multiple and various evaluations before any deployment. So you and I always emphasize, of course, that lingering stigma that is still associated with mental illness. You just touched on it very briefly now, especially among the black communities, right? And we always highlight the need for more awareness. If it goes untreated, can also be misdiagnosed and also lead to these grave results.
Definitely. And I think that's what, honestly, we really need to hammer into people that, you know, it doesn't mean you're crazy. And some people are predisposed to mental health challenges, unlike others. So, for example, in this case, maybe, you know, the guy, the person who shot other people or stabbed them rather, maybe he was exposed or rather at risk to develop mental health challenges. You know, we don't know the context of what played out. So we really need to understand that just because me and you are exposed to the same situation does not mean we will react the same, and there is no necessarily right way of reacting. It's because we are predisposed. So you might develop depression and I might not, just because of my brain wiring, my perspective, and my personality. And some people are you know, predisposed to other things such as your diabetes, cholesterol. So we really need to understand that it's similar, right? So some people might be predisposed to anxiety, PTSD, and others not. It does not mean that they will not benefit from coming to see a clinical psychologist like me, the same way someone will be predisposed to cancer, etc., the physical ailment. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, but really we need to understand that if you are working with trauma, there is what we call vicarious trauma or secondary traumatization, where we witnessing such incidences will impact you, whether you acknowledge it or not. So there is that need to really do the work so that you can thrive in spite of, you know, the type of work environment you find yourself in.
Absolutely, Doctor. And just not certain workplaces, I suppose for all workplaces, just to ensure the overall mental wellness of your employees. That's quite necessary. Doctor, as always, great input there. That is Dr. Kidumeji Mashego. She's a clinical psychologist on the mental well-being as well as need for counseling for our army as well as police as well as other services in the work personnel area.